And the first presentation will be done by Adarsh Nagayan Pandey. He joins us today from India. He unfortunately couldn't join us in Bonn. And he worked on the project with the title ECMWF User Dashboard. The mentors of this project were Sylvie Lamy-Tepeau and Edward Rosett. And how the project presentations will work, for each presentation we have 30 minutes. And at the beginning, the mentors will give an introduction on the motivation of the project and also how this will be or might be useful after ESoC and how it can be integrated into ECMWF activities. And then Adarsh will join from India and show what he had developed during the coding the past 4 months. For now, I will hand over to Edward.
Thank you, and hello everyone. So just a few words on the introduction. So the user dashboard for us, it's already a second year of this project. So originally, we had ECMWF already has a dashboard application that allows you to view graphical products, but ECMWF offers a wide range of applications, of web services, and we were looking for ways on allowing our users to actually look at these applications and monitor these applications from a central dashboard. And so our idea for the first phase of this project was basically to have a customizable user dashboard where you can monitor and possibly control the application, and users can basically customize it the way they want. So in the first phase, this dashboard was developed. You could monitor a fixed number of applications that were implemented by last year's mentee, and the code base was already nice and extendable. So we focused on the next challenges of the next phase of this project, and thought about how can this actually fit in our operational environment and in our processes at ECMWF. And one special thing is that most of the applications are developed in a decentralized manner. So you have application developers that tend to several applications, but we don't have like a central application development where people maintain all the applications. So how to get all these different applications into one dashboard, how to keep the interface consistent, how to make the interface actually aware of new applications that are developed, and at the same time still give the application developers the flexibility to add new elements to the dashboard, to update the dashboard widgets. So for this year's challenge, we try to address these challenges and these problems by thinking about the problem in a more generic way, and try to basically think about widgets and how can we categorize them, how can we develop some sort of a standardized interface. And now over to Adarsh, who is joining us from Bangalore in India, who will now present his results.
Hi, good morning, folks. I'm Adarsh Narayan Pandey. I worked on the user dashboard project under Team 23 in ESoC 2022, mentored by Sylvie and Edward. So thank you for a nice introduction, Edward. The outline of this project will be something like the goal. We'll go through it once quickly. We'll revisit the user dashboard before ESoC 2022. We'll visit the user dashboard v2.0. We'll dive a bit deeper into the architecture of it. We'll have some type-based widget discussion. Then one of the biggest problems was how do we make it user specific? So we'll have some discussion on that, followed by a project demo. and the deliverables achieved, and the future scope of the project. So as Edward said, the project saw some basic architecture after ESOC 2021 and allowed some apps to be connected to the dashboard. However, there was a need for any app to be able to be present on the dashboard as per the user's convenience. And this was like one of the major challenges for ESOC 2022. So if we go through the application before ESOC 2022, we have a nice chart browser here, which has some charts. We have the add widget button, a dashboard button, and some things that we'll cover later. Now, when we click on add widget button, we'll see some types of widgets that were there, like a text widget, a chart widget, events widget, March activity widget, satellite alerts widget, and stuff. Now, the problem here is all these widgets are very specific to a kind of to one application. And if you want to say, if you want to, let's say, add 20 more applications to it, in this particular framework, you'll have to add another 20 in the same way. And that would require making changes to the code base of the dashboard. And let's say if you want to scale it to more than 20, let's say you want to scale it daily, let's say. So in that case, there will be a lot of changes made to the dashboard on daily basis. And we are sure that a lot of code will be repetitive. So the problem was to make it more generic, to be able to classify into different categories so as to be able to render a lot of widgets not specific to the application but to the type. So this is how it looked before ESOC 2022. Now after ESOC 2022, the current status of the project stands something like this. On the visual front, you might not be able to notice a lot of changes, but if you go through the functionalities, we have a widget browser now and an endpoint manager. We can see that the table widgets earlier didn't have any customization and colors, etc., to denote the status. So that has been fixed. So yeah, let's go ahead. And the tech stack of the user dashboard v2.0 is largely the same as v1.0. It's based on TypeScript language. The backend libraries are Node.js and Express.js. Frontend libraries are Next.js and Markdown to JSX converter. Database tools are MongoDB and Mongoose to make API calls to MongoDB. API handlers, we are using Axios. And for authentication, we are using Passport.js. Diving deeper into the architecture of it, how did we solve the problem of any application being able to communicate their widgets to us? So we, after some back and forth discussions on this, came with a structure that if there is some endpoint that some application that say has some widgets to offer, so how can it give that communicate that to us? So there is an API structure that if that endpoint follows, can render the widget to our application. So the API response of that endpoint should look something like this. It will be a widget that will be an array of widgets. The entries will be thumbnail, which is the image that is to be displayed in the widget browser. A type, the widget type, which will help us define the way how it is going to be rendered. An application URL that points to the application which is currently serving this particular widget. The name, tags, href, ID, and description. So by conforming to this, any endpoint can render its widgets to our application. Now, diving deeper into the architecture, when we click on the widget browser, what happens is we see if we have some cached data already from these endpoints. If not, we make a call to dashboards backends widget endpoints. We get those endpoints from where we'll have the widgets. We cache it, and then we hit the individual endpoints, which give us the widgets that are rendered on the screen. Sorry, folks. I think there is some electricity issue here. Just a second. Yeah. Am I visible now?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So now what happens when you click on add to dashboard button is we make a get request to the particular widget API endpoint. We extract some details out of it, and make a configuration object and pass it to a tab manager object. The tab manager is responsible for holding and updating the internal state to add the new widget configuration object. Then when we click on dashboard, the tab manager identifies the widgets of specific to the type, the table type, or if it's an iframe or if it's a text type widget. Calls the widget browser and sends a request to the widgets href to get the data to be rendered finally on the screen, and then it renders the data on the screen. So we were able to abstract out some of the widget types using which a lot of applications could be rendered as widgets on the dashboard. So as of now, there are three major types: a table type, a text widget, and iframe widget. And additionally, we have a note widget that you saw earlier in one of the slides, which can be used to jot down some points. Now, from these three widget types, any application can be made available to the dashboard by just conforming to the API format in which these widgets accept the request. And this makes it really powerful and scalable, because now you can add any number of widgets that you want just by conforming to the API, and you won't have to make changes to the dashboard every time you want to render a new application. You just need to conform to the API structure that we follow. So going on to the table widgets, these are for rendering any kind of tabular data, and we have allowed color coding according to the CSS colors based on the API response from the concerned application. That gives us a nice visual representation. So the data, the API response from a table widget should look something like this. We'll have a description of what this does, some tags, href. Now coming to the data, data is a 2D array in which each array is a column. So this is rendered as the first column. This is rendered as the second column. We have an ID, a widget type, an application URL, the name. Now the styling is one of the really good features that we have here, because it allows us to style the entries in individual columns in the way that the user or in the way that the application developer wants us to see. This is very important because this allows us to give us a visual representation of status. Let's say if it's something which is erroneous, so it will be red, and if it's something successful, it will be green and stuff. So this is how styling looks like. We'll have column based styling, so for first column, for second column, and so on. The final data rendering looks something like this. We have the tables and the styled status. Going on to the text widgets, for the applications that send textual data, this is the type of widget this should conform to. It has the ability to process the markdown text and convert accordingly. Now this is very powerful because we know that markdown has a lot of features which are very simple. So if you want to, a lot of styling which you can render your data in tables without going into a lot of technical stuff. You just need to conform to the way the markdown is written. So this is a really powerful thing for the application developers that just want to send textual data but with a nice little formatting and don't want to get into a lot of details to conform it to a table type widget. And other than table type widget, you can have simple text. So the API response, typical API response of a text widget looks something like this. We'll have a widget type, a description, tags, ID, href, data, that is a markdown data that we have, markdown string that we'll have, thumbnail, and the name of it. And this is how it is rendered on the screen. So the previous slide that you saw was this widget, this widget's data. Something like this can be rendered into something like this, which I feel is a really powerful thing, because now we don't need to go into technical details of how we are converting into table and conforming to it. We just need to send a markdown table and we'll be able to render it. Next, coming on to the iframe widgets. So iframes are something that you must have seen while browsing any website, the Twitter share buttons or the Facebook like buttons. They are in our context, iframes are widget type suitable for all applications that want to provide a rich user interface through the widget. if they want to provide, let's say, more interactivity. So a table won't allow that, or a text widget won't allow that. So we can render it in an iframe, which gives the flexibility to offer more interactivity that you will see in the charts widget that we'll have. The typical response of an iframe widget looks something like this. We'll again have tags, href. Data here is a bit different because it will have a source. The source is the link that is rendered as an iframe in the screen that is embedded in the widget. ID, description, widget type, application URL, name, tracker, and thumbnail. The UI looks something like this. So this is how an iframe chart, which is rendered as an iframe, is rendered on our dashboard. Now, till now, we solved the problem of having a lot of widgets by conforming to the type. The next step was, how do we make it user specific? How do we allow the users, different set of users, to add the endpoints that they want to fetch the data from? And that's where the solution of authentication comes very handy. We can have different accounts and give the user the flexibility to add endpoints, only the endpoints that he wants, to his profile, and render the data from there. So to do this, we implemented an endpoint manager. An endpoint manager is a central place where you can add the endpoints, from where you'll be calling those widgets. So we have like add endpoint, add widget endpoint button, a refresh endpoints, and delete all endpoints. And you'll have a list of endpoints rendered in the endpoint manager as and when you add them. Another way to add an endpoint will be in Widget Browser, where there is a button called Add Widget Endpoint. This gives ease of use for the user to add without going to the endpoint manager every time. When you click on Add Widget Endpoint, this screen appears where you'll have to add an URL and a token. When you click on Verify, some checks are made, after which either you get a message saying there was some error that was encountered, or you'll get an option to save, by clicking on which you can add this endpoint to your user profile. So it's time for a quick demo now. So the demo will be in two parts. I'll show how it feels for a user that is not logged in. So I'll have to share my entire screen again. Yeah, is the screen visible?
Yes.
Yeah. So here we have a user that is not logged in. How do we know that? We know that because there is a login option here. Now, what happens when a user is not logged in? He'll see an endpoint which is there by default for everyone. This is like a public API, which we can say that offers some sets of widgets for users to explore. He won't have an access to add endpoint or delete endpoint buttons. On the dashboard, sorry, on the widget browser, he'll have the widgets from these endpoints. So if you have a look at it, we'll have satellite alerts, date, time, and few charts here. So this is like a limited flexibility and is there just for the user to see what the dashboard is about. And once he creates an account, he gets access to all the features of customization. So going to the dashboard after adding a few widgets. Yeah, it might be a bit laggy for you guys because we are on Zoom. So yeah, this is how an application, like charts, are being rendered that we saw in the presentation. And if we want to add satellite alerts, for example, we'll have a tabular representation of them. And we can move around the canvas and set it in like any fashion we want to. So that was for a user that is not logged in. Now I'll have to just a second. For a logged in user, I'll have to change the screen. Yep. So this is how it looks for a logged in user. Like I have logged in from my account that I created just recently. So with this, we get an option to add more widget endpoints than the one that we saw before. So if we want to add a widget endpoint, I'll add one that has a secret, and that's how it's like giving us the power to add the endpoints by having a token that is given to the user by the application developer. So once we have that token, we'll click on verify. We see that it's okay to proceed and save button is enabled. So we'll save it. And we can see that the new widgets are there in the dashboard, in the widget browser. So these are the open IFS widgets. We can like try adding them and see. Yep. So these are like the open IFS activity widgets. These are the table widgets that we talked about, the markdown, like the text widget that is rendered as a markdown. And we can add maybe few charts as well. Yep. So now we have like few charts as well that we can add on the screen. Now this feature that you saw, being able to add any endpoint that we want to fetch the data from, is like a really powerful feature in my opinion, because it gives us a new scale to operate on. We can just have different endpoints of the applications that serve a lot of widgets, and we can just simply add them without requiring the dashboard applications developer to add each widget individually, like we had in the version 1. So if you go to the endpoint manager, we'll have these two added. We also have an option to delete it from there if you don't want a particular endpoint to fetch the widgets from. And we also have an option to clear all the endpoints. Now, let's go through the internal working of the new features that we talked about. So when we click on verify, what happens is an endpoint verify endpoint function is called, that runs internal checks for duplicates with the cached endpoints. And if everything is right here, it will send a get request to the endpoint with the token if it exists. And if the status of that is 200, which means the request succeeded, will enable the save button, or else will display an appropriate error message. When you click on the save button, a post request is made to the dashboard backend's widget endpoint, and if we get a success from there, we'll make the database call to add the endpoint, else we'll display an appropriate error message. On clicking delete all the endpoints, we'll again make a delete request to the widget dashboard backend's delete widget endpoint. And if it succeeds, we make a database call to restore the endpoints to default at the first login. As in the endpoints manager state will be the one with just one endpoint that we saw that was there for the user that is not logged in. And if it's not successful, we'll display an appropriate error message. On clicking the trash icon for an individual endpoint, we'll have a similar type of delete request made to that individual endpoint. And then if the result, like if the request succeeds, we make the DB call to delete the endpoint, or we display an appropriate error message. Now, throughout the coding period, the deliverables achieved could be summed up as follows. We held back and forth discussions on how do we get the format to which a lot of application developers could conform to easily, like the endpoints, what format should they give us the data in. And that was like one of the achievements, major achievements that we have for this ESoC 2022. Created the widget browser, which is a central place to explore the available application widgets that can be added to the dashboard. Transform the architecture of the project from a centralized widget management tool to a generalized widget API. What this necessarily means is that earlier, when let's say an application developer wanted his widget to be there in the dashboard, he would have to go to the dashboards developer and ask him to code it, like add this widget and add this widget and stuff. But now it's more like the dashboard is a client for them. They can just create an endpoint with the widgets and conform to our API structure, and that's it. That's where their part is done, and the developer doesn't need to handle it specially or create a new widget just for that. He already has a structure to which, if they conform to, will be able to render it. Now we added a redirect button to redirect the user to a particular application for more information, a refresh button for appropriate widgets. We added the main types of application architectures and rendered them successfully as widgets in the dashboard. We allowed a markdown based data rendering through text widgets, enabled custom styling in table widgets according to the application's need to give a nice visual representation. We accommodated chart widgets as iframe widgets, and iframe widgets are really powerful because not only with chart widgets, you can add any type of other widget that you want to, because iframes generally uh, are there for like a window to another web page. So that's there. We can render any number of application data as widgets on the dashboard that conform to our API structure. And we created endpoints for managing widget URLs in the backend and integrated with the UI. We made a central endpoint manager for handling the endpoint related operations. We covered all the sensitive data with the icon that can be seen only by the logged in user if the need be. We added the drawwords to add widgets. We implemented the save widget functionality, and one thing was not there, which was like when we were logging out in version 1, the cache was not getting cleared, which is kind of a potential security risk, because even after logging out you could see the widgets that were added by the user when he was logged in. So this was really important for us. We were successfully able to deploy this version on ECMWF infrastructure, and I would like to give credit to Edward for that, like for helping me with this part. So what's next for this project? So while the program has come to an end, the project still has like a lot of potential left to be explored. For example, now that we have an option to add the widgets by adding the endpoint, the next interesting thing could be from the application itself. If there was, let's say, an add to dashboard button that would directly make the call to dashboards backend and add it here instead of we the users adding it here in the dashboard. That would be like something really interesting to see. And uh, it will be interesting to see if someone can improve this architecture to make it a bit more reliable and enhance the UI and make it a bit more usable. So I'm really excited about where this project might go, because there are like still a lot of uh, potential paths that could be taken in this project. And finally, coming to the acknowledgements. So last 4 months have been like really full of learning. I'm thankful to the team, Sylvia and Edward, because we had a lot of meetings. We used to discuss the features and the ways to implement them. And taking it to deployment is like going to be one of the highlights, even for me, because this, I hope that this project lives like for a long time and serves as the base for more enhancements to it. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity that ESOC has given me, and it was like really fun and a learning working with Edward and Sylvie for the last 4 months.